precision, logic, coordination, and consistency. Doubtless, these are principles that help make the world go round. And yet, the system would not be flawless without the power of an idea, the power of an ideal. The American lawyer Paul Harris and his 3 friends founded Rotary International way back in 1905. The first meeting of the Rotary Club of the world took place on February 23, 1905, in Chicago, Illinois. Just as actors say there are no small parts, likewise, there are no small projects when it comes to helping people in distress. This is well documented by the fact that the first project the Rotarians carried out in Chicago was public convenience. Public convenience was probably quite necessary. From the outset, Rotary was basically devoted to providing humanitarian aid. They just helped their neighbors. The Rotary idea is more than 1 century old. It's about helping people in need. And it goes without saying that I will donate funds if I have any. I'd say this is an idea of global import. To be Rotarian is to serve. I mean, if someone seeks profit by being a Rotarian, he should stop and start to know how best to divide his time between his profession, his family life, and, needless to say, his service to the Rotary movement. It isn't as much about local or regional charity work as about today's projects, which are actually global and need resources that can be pooled. The Rotary ideas quickly spread throughout North America and penetrated especially Britain, Ireland, South America, and after the First World War, also continental Europe, and by 1925, Czechoslovakia. Every year, Rotarians meet at their district and regional conferences and assemblies on more than 500 locations around the world. Their get-togethers serve to pinpoint the projects they want to focus on in the coming years. These projects address virtually all walks of life, all professions and inclinations of the Rotary people, and the promotion of young personalities in general and humanitarian activities in particular. One of the long-term projects attended by Czech and Slovak Rotarians has entered the annals of the international history of healthcare. Polio, a mortal threat to all nations around the globe until the 20th century. Hundreds of treatises have been written about this mortal disease. Evidence about polio was found in ancient Egyptian graves. This disease is caused by a virus. Its early basic symptoms start as the flu. There's a high temperature, headache, muscular pain and aching joints, and joint pain. And then there's damage to parts of the spinal cord and nerves that induce or enable motion. They paralyze a child or an adult so they cannot walk or move. Basically, it's a disease of spinal cord nerves. President Roosevelt was a prominent political figure. He contracted infectious polio in his youth, and he actually once took a treatment here in Janské Lázně. Some photographs show him walking with difficulty because he was a polio victim. Some polio forms may be deadly. They paralyze the breathing muscles, but such forms are rare nowadays. I fell ill in December 1939. I lived in Hradec Králové. I contracted poliomyelitis. The first epidemic struck here in 1939. Surely migration must have been a factor. The country was occupied, things were happening. The epidemic then recurred every 4 or 5 years. I was admitted into the infection ward of the Hradec Králové hospital. We received blood transfusions from patients who had survived polio. Then I went through further treatment in the orthopedic ward in Hradec Králové, where I had more than 20 muscular and tendon surgeries. But I never started walking on my own, without assistance. I was 11 when I got my first treatment in 1947 in Janské Lázně, where polio has been treated to this day. Patients with various conditions began to visit Janské Lázně long before the Second World War. The sanatorium gradually earned its spurs as an internationally recognized establishment specializing in treating after-polio syndrome. More than 10,000 people from former Czechoslovakia who were born in the first half of the last century are still suffering from this lifelong incapacitation. The history of Czech and Slovak Rotarians before World War II is linked with Prague's municipal house. It was the seat of the office of a Rotary district from 1931 to 1939, and this is also where the Prague Rotarians used to meet, in the Sladkovsky Hall. The Prague Rotary Club had 170 members, and there were another 1,000 Rotary members scattered across Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia, Slovakia, and Ruthenia, or Transcarpathian Ukraine. Prominent Czechoslovak personalities would meet in the municipal house in the period between the two world wars, including Jan Masaryk, industrialists Václav Klement and Jindřich Valdez, senior executives of the Baťa footwear empire of Zlín and the Škoda Corporation of Pilzeň, as well as the Václav Havel family clan. These early Rotarians focused on polio, but to no avail. The Rotarians in pre-war Czechoslovakia basically followed up on the programs and goals that were pursued in the rest of the world, but they primarily devoted themselves to humanitarian projects. Most importantly, they rendered support to students, their shelters and exchange projects, because access to education and the exchange of information were quite different from today's standards. The Boy and Girl Scouts also deserved support, and that's applicable today as well. Nowadays, international high school student exchanges are a matter of course for Rotarians.
Dobrý deň, som Karol z Mexika. Teraz bývam na Slovensku, v Banskej Bystrici. No, tak teraz chcem poďakovať za všetko, úplne všetko, lebo som poznala veľmi dobré ľudia.
International students spend 1 year with Czech and Slovak families. They attend local high schools. In return, our students travel the world. It's just another example of extensive international cooperation within the Rotary community. The summer floods of 2002 were a major test of human endurance and human solidarity. The Vltava River swelled its banks and flooded 1/5 of the Czech territory. Paradoxically, destruction breeds hope. All Czech and Slovak Rotary clubs joined the relief effort, and worthy assistance came from foreign Rotarians as well. The story of the Scherzel family is a case in point. When we reached our place 5 days later, it was a no-go area then. And when water began to subside, we found our little house flooded up to almost 30 feet. All we could see was 3 feet of gable wall and the chimney. We began to realize the implications of what had happened to us.
Takže jsme si začali uvědomovat prostě následek toho všeho, co prostě pro nás vzniklo.
And then one Prague Rotary Club offered help. They took care of all the paperwork and red tape it took to commission an emergency, hurdle-free accommodation, and their German partner club helped them obtain money and household equipment. But the floods of 2002 were not the only liaison between the Scherzel family and the Rotary movement. Mr. and Mrs. Scherzel are physically handicapped because they had polio when they were kids. My doctor saw me, examined me. I had a fever. My dad asked him if these were not the symptoms of early polio. My doctor frowned and then said, "No, don't believe the propaganda." And so it was over. I got some pills, but when I got up the next morning, I left my bed and wanted to go to the bathroom. I made 2 steps, and my knees failed me. It was as if somebody had just cut off my legs. In the years after the Second World War, there were almost 3,000 new polio cases reported in Czechoslovakia. That was in addition to the very many cases reported earlier. Something had to be done to prevent the evil disease from spreading further. Some serious effort had to be made. Dr. Karel Žáček, my older friend, a virologist and epidemiologist, was the initiator of a major project to fight polio. The project included field research and production and application of vaccine for the whole child population of Czechoslovakia. He admonished us way back in 1954 to engage in a serious battle with polio. By then, Dr. Salk in America had invented injectable vaccines against polio. We used it to vaccinate the entire child population. At the same time, Dr. Sabin in Cincinnati, Ohio, invented live polio vaccine, which is administered in the form of drops in the mouth of the child. The virus in this oral vaccine had been weakened in the laboratory in order to stay harmful, but to produce antibodies against the polio virus in children or adults vaccinated in this way.
Vyvolává imunitu, ale neškodí.
We started to work with the oral vaccine shortly after it was discovered. After a successful field study in 1959, we vaccinated the whole child population between 0 and 14 years in Czechoslovakia in a campaign conducted between 1959 and 1960. We had a phenomenal success. Since August 1960, there have been no new polio cases reported in Czechoslovakia. The American professor, Albert Sabin, who discovered the vaccine and was an honorary member of the Cincinnati Rotary Club, visited Prague at short notice. In the 1980s, he made Rotary International start the Global Polio Plus project, helping to commence its implementation. But first things first. When he visited Czechoslovakia in the early 1960s, he congratulated the country on national television for its efforts and success. To quote, he said, "I think we should congratulate Czechoslovakia for being one of the first countries in the world to have not only studied the possibilities of application of our new vaccine, but also to have successfully used its potentials to the full. I am greatly pleased by what I could see in your country. The results you have achieved may not have their parallels anywhere else in the world. The very fact that you have not recorded a single case of polio this August shows how successful your polio fighting plan is."
Jak úspěšný je váš plán boje proti obrně?
Dokonce
Professor Sabin visited Czechoslovakia on 2 occasions, and with his help, the State Institute of Health in Prague managed to produce locally enough polio vaccine to administer to the whole child population of Czechoslovakia.
V dostatočnom množstve, aby mohla byť detská populácia Československa očkovaná.
Naše očkování mělo ty vlastnosti.
Our vaccination program involved quite a short mass vaccination campaign. This method proved its worth around the globe in the effort to eradicate poliomyelitis. It's still used in the campaign to stamp out polio. The campaign to eradicate polio on a global scale was launched in 1988. Cases of polio are still registered in 4 countries around the world: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India in Asia, and Nigeria in Africa. Service above self has always been my ideal. It's our central motto. When I was recruited to join Rotary, a friend of mine explained me the ideals of Rotary, and they corresponded to my ambitions. Medicine is about helping people, and epidemiology, which is my profession, has preventative instruments to better help people with vaccinations and other methods.
Nástroje, ktorými môžeme intenzívnejšie než bežní obyvatelia pomáhať.
To je záležitost, která nepotřebuje jenom.
We don't need only research workers, good vaccines that are available today, complete organizing teams provided by the World Health Organization. What we also need, as does everyone in the world, is massive financial support. We are getting such financial support, one of the biggest in the world, from Rotary International. I mean, we are getting steady support from Rotary International.
Souvisle dodává Rotary International.
As a young doctor, I took part in the revaccination of the population in Zambia. For a time, I worked there in the Air Medical Service. Later, I worked for the Bush hospitals. I'm happy my friends and I side with those who could help finance the project. You see, my activities in our Rotary Club have given me a lot of satisfaction over many years. We've actually contributed a lot of money to help solve the problem, more than most of the other Czech and Slovak clubs. Rotary and polio. It's a very important project. 20 years ago, Rotary International asked all of its more than 32,000 clubs around the world, associating more than 1.5 million members, to help eradicate polio. In Africa, I started in Ethiopia. There were times my outpatient portfolio consisted of 2,000 children with post-polio syndrome, and there was no vaccination then. Countries like Ethiopia tend to be quite problematic, and they are prone to conflicts. Countrywide vaccination is quite a problem, and moreover, penetrable borders make it easier for the virus to spread into neighboring countries. I had patients who rode 3 weeks on the back of donkeys to reach our dispensary, and we tried to apply packs and other remedies to ease their lot due to the disease. The participation of doctors, paramedics, hundreds of thousands of Rotary volunteers, and very many other people in the immunization campaigns and supplying medical equipment to field dispensaries has a positive effect on the gradual improvement of overall health care in the given regions where vaccination projects are in progress. A long-term investment of more than $5 billion in the Polio Plus project, with Rotary sharing in with more than $600 million, will find its fruition in time. It's expected that joint efforts of Rotary International, the World Health Organization, governments, and several other partners will help eradicate poliomyelitis in the near future. It will be Rotary's most valuable gift to the children of the world. In this area, the Rotary ideal has more than 80 years to its credit in terms of tradition, discontinued by World War II and the developments after 1948. Rotarian ideas and clubs were effectively restored only after 1989. I say one is born as a Rotarian because the ethic of whatever one pursues is one of the core principles of Rotary.
Protože jeden ze základních principů rotariánství je etika ve veškerém jeho počínání.
Private life and professional career are the start.
A opravdu snaha
Indeed, the desire to serve and to help others without selfish considerations is actually the cornerstone of the Rotary motto.
Service above self.
Polio is a living proof of the human community's wish to help each other. Even as the Polio Plus project is reaching its fruition, 1,200,000 Rotarian men and women associated in its 23,000 clubs are now making their mark on 200 countries in many parts of the world. Among them are the members of more than 60 Rotary clubs in the International District 2240 that compromises the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Rotary ideal is a powerful appeal to people to work well and feel for those who need help and to make them spread good ideas. In troubled waters, it's an anchor that will hold every good ship.